I don't even want to.
Sorry.
That would be a matchup I would love to see in person in some form or fashion.
Sorry, I tell bad jokes. I have to apologize.
Isn't that like a thing of our people, like between veterans and people in the LGBTQ community? Don't we just exclusively just make jokes?
And gamers in general.
Gamers
Yeah,
too.
that's true,
Like
that's true.
it's a whole. We got the trifecta. Like we are nothing but jokers. Like if I'm being serious, you should be scared. Like there's something wrong if I'm not using humor as my trauma response. You know what I mean?
I live to upset a rose the heteros.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay.
I like that. Heteros.
Yes. Good. Yes. All right. All right. I'm not gonna try to keep y'all too long. So an hour. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. All right. He's like, heck yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. First, let's get some intros going. Oh wait, first we'll start this over. So this is a discussion about LGBTQ plus veterans in gaming for Women's History Month. That's a mouthful, I know. But I want to I wanted to gather some veterans together to talk about being, a veteran, being in the military, our experiences as LGBTQ, and as whether we were in the closet or out of the closet, or even if some of that identity has changed, maybe you figured out things that you didn't realize, and then, being a veteran, getting into gaming. A lot of vets don't realize how much gaming is an option afterwards. I've received a lot of questions about that, and it's something we can help share and talk about. So if people are interested, this is where it gets them. Anyway, so we're gonna start off with some introductions. I guess I'll go first. We're gonna do name, occupation, and first game you ever played. So you guys should know me, but I'm Sarah Begert, the social media manager at StackUp. And the first game I ever played was Galaga. If that ages me, But so who wants to go next?
I'll go. I'll just volunteer. Hello, I'm Divine Diana Ramsey. It's like I throw in the divine just for, well, it's just because I am divine. I am a person in their 40s. And so I'll just leave it at that. And the first game I ever played was Pong. Like I knew someone who had a Pong machine, like the home console. That's right. Thank you. It's just too sweet. But yes, Pong. On an Odyssey.
Wow.
That's awesome. And I'll go next. I'm Vicky Doll, and I am a cosmetologist, hairdresser, makeup artist person. And the first game I played was probably Super Mario or Donkey Kong on the Super Nintendo. I don't remember which came first. They both kind of appear in my memory at about the same time. So one of those two.
Hi. So I'm Peeklin. I am currently an executive assistant to several VPs over at corporate GameStop. And it's basically like I'm a jack of all trades, but it's a lot of fun. And the first game I ever played was, I think, Super Mario 3 on the SNES. But the first game I ever actually owned myself, and wasn't just told to play it so that my mom could be distracted, was Pokemon Red.
Nice. Gotta love that old school Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, what branches were you all in? And were you out at the time that you served? You know, if you knew or didn't know, you know, what was that experience like?
I'll go
Ooh.
first. No one's volunteering. I'll go first. So, I was in the Air Force. I was security forces in the Air Force from between 1998 until 2003. So almost 20 years ago. I've been separated for almost 20 years. I was definitely not out back then. I have some pretty awful story about don't ask, don't tell. So I served under don't ask, don't tell, and that was a pretty horrific policy. I can say it wasn't going into what I was told about it and understood about it. It's like, well, that was definitely not the thing. And I can say that for years. It's like I did, yeah, the years in the military was definitely the bear, even though when I got to Germany and I went on basically like, all right, I could have my Rumspringa now in Germany, you know, just I was pretty much closeted the entire time because it was very much a thing. It's like, yes, even if the hint and things like that, they will kick you out in a heartbeat and it will not be a nice discharge. So
I'll go next. I was in the Army for 6 years from '09 to 2015. And Don't Ask, Don't Tell got repealed while I was in service. So I was definitely closeted in the beginning. And like, because of my upbringing, I was very like, no, I'm hetero. And then I was like, oh, wait, but there's all these pretty girls. And so I kind of started to explore while I was in and wound up identifying as bi by the time I was out. But like, it's only been recently that I've like fully understood my sexuality. So yeah.
So I was actually in the Army as well from the same years, '09 to 2015. And I was an intelligence analyst, and I was pretty closeted for most of it, mostly because it was the way of how, even in training or with the platoon you're with or whatnot, how you hear your other squad mates, just what they say about other people or what they would say about other people's sexuality and how they would talk about it. It wasn't the most welcoming environment. So when you were thinking about things, like, I didn't realize that I was pan until a little bit later. I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm bi. And then later on, I realized I was actually more pan. But even then, I didn't want to tell anybody when I was in that I was bi. I didn't want to tell anybody that I even had those thoughts because I knew how they talked about women or gay people or in general, like when they thought they weren't listening.
I can personally testify to all the awful things men would say. Unfortunately, it's like it's like anytime a man tries to deny, it's like, I've never said, nope, no. It's like I've been in your little secret clubs, unfortunately.
Yeah, I actually came in around 2011 and I was in until about 2014 in the Navy. I will say the Navy is probably one of the gayest of the branches.
So that's not just a stereotype?
It's pretty gay. There are a lot of gay people in the Navy, okay? That first 6 months, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was still in, but they were doing training to tell people it's going out. So this is what it's going to be like. And, you know, by the time it went out, like nobody cared. Everyone at that point was like, oh, it's going out. No one cares. You do what you want. So I got to be out the whole time I was out. And at the time I identified as a lesbian and like the way back then I was a little more mask presenting, a butch lesbian. And I would act like the dudes. So I didn't really get as much of the homophobia because, you know, the guys just saw me as one of them, which I've grown out of, obviously. But it's one of those things where, you know, I just kind of, I acted like one of the dudes and I got accepted as one of them for the most part. And I didn't really have to deal with like half of the things that other people may have had to deal with. So, you know, that's just, it's an interesting aspect about the military experience, you know, especially for women. Yeah.
Well, and something else that I'd like to add is that as the like hetero initially presenting bi girl, they were like, honestly, we wound up getting like overly sexualized as like, oh, we just want to see you make out with girls. And it wasn't like oh, this is just your choice. It was like oh, I want to see that type of deal. And so it wasn't a comfortable way to come out. It wasn't a comfortable way to like begin exploring your sexuality for sure, because you were definitely being observed in a negative way. Even if it wasn't like negative words, it was definitely like
The objectification.
Yeah, the objectification. Yeah. Yeah.
But it also it would flip very quickly depending on if you met their standard of what they thought was cute or beautiful or whatnot. If you didn't fit that standard, you were immediately shamed, you were insulted, you were all these other things. But if you were cute enough, then it was hot. At least for what happened in my experience. But I know personally, I just try to keep quiet because my unit ended up being in Texas as well. So it was just like I was part of an infantry brigade combat team. So it was a lot of like macho men or men wanting to be macho. And it was one of those things where you make any hint of your sexuality and it's something other than heterosexual, it did not work out well.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting to think about too, because the Army, their bases tend to be more localized and also overseas at the same time. So the experiences can also depend on where you are at. In the Navy, you've got your coastlines, and a lot of those coastline places tend to be more LGBT friendly. East Coast, you've got Virginia is not too bad about it, and then California, that's a haven basically, and so is Washington. So I feel like maybe that has a little bit too on how those experiences go, especially if you end up deploying somewhere that's a majority homophobic or like not, depending on their culture. So let's move on to like the veteran experience, because that I feel like that changes a little bit, because for me the Navy was insular. Like I was in a bit of a bubble. Coming back to civilian life, coming back to Oklahoma was like I kind of had to realize that it's different. The VA feels like it's a little behind on stuff. Both for women and LGBT vets. So it's like I was in this little bubble. I felt safe. I was constantly out. I didn't have to worry too much about anything. But then, I get to the VA and it's like, yeah. And then I'm young. Most vets, people see that and they think old, So what have your experiences with the VA as a veteran been like?
I would like to talk about this because I just had a little discussion with my counselor today. Last year when I went to get blood work, I found out that they had marked me as high risk for my blood work, and therefore like whenever I did that, they like did all the STD panels, and I found out it's because my counselor, I'm very open with my counselor, and I told her that I was not just bi but also poly and that I date around. And because of that and the fact that they are a little bit behind on like what being poly means, they misinterpreted my lifestyle. And at the time it made me feel a little bad because I was like, hold up, like I don't do anything risky. I'm very safe with everything that I do, and so it's been little things like that whenever I reveal a part of my lifestyle that most care people in the VA system just don't really understand it, or they just don't really take it seriously either.
Yeah.
So, and as just socially as a veteran, it has been the worst trying to find friends, trying to like connect with people I work with. Like, I have been the only veteran in my field for the last like 3 years. I haven't talked to a single other veteran doing what I'm doing. And so it's been really lonely, like just in general, just trying to be a veteran and like get back out there and like try and make friends again, because all my high school friends are gone. All my military friends are scattered across the world. And, you know, here I am just by myself in Colorado with minimal support. So, yeah, it's been a struggle.
Do you feel like that drew you towards gaming at all?
Absolutely. Because my brother at one point was like, dude, you have no friends. Like, what are you doing with your life? And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, you should try streaming. Like, it's a way to connect with people. And within even just my first couple of months, back when the veteran category thing was still a thing, and before they did tags and all that, I was just able to hunt down a whole bunch of veterans and like connect with people who had the same interests I had, even though they're still scattered across the world. You know, at least there's more of a connection than just, oh, hey, we both served. It's like, okay, we have all these things in common, and like we can really talk and connect. And you don't have to have that in person necessarily to like feel connected with somebody. So that has definitely helped. And taking breaks from streaming has hurt my mental health more than it's helped it. Like, neurotypical people, I feel like, need those breaks because whatever. But like for me, that's like my only socialization is whenever I'm gaming or streaming. I don't properly connect with people otherwise.
So who else here is neurotypical or neurodivergent?
I am also neurodivergent. I didn't find out until after the military, actually.
Same.
Yep,
And my therapist, or when I actually got my diagnosis, they said, you know, the military is probably one of the reasons you didn't get diagnosed with this sooner, because it kept you on a set schedule, it kept you on a set path, it basically made it to where you didn't have to make the decisions. So you just were on autopilot for it.
Yeah, it's actually funny you say you didn't have to make the decisions, because when I joined the military, like one of my first thoughts was, I don't feel like making decisions for myself right now. So I'm just going to let someone else tell me what to do. But by the time I got out, I was like, I really hate people telling me what to do. I am never doing anything like this ever again. And you know, I had authority problems the whole time. But it's actually wild how that like kind of attracted someone like me. You know, and I didn't find out I had ADHD till, you know, last year. So, and the signs were always there. So it's like, oh.
Well, and did you go through any counseling or anything while you were in service? Like, did they ever have an opportunity to diagnose you? Because I was in counseling for years and they never diagnosed me with bipolar disorder. It took me getting out and waiting 3 years for them to do that. So I'm just curious if...
I feel like when it comes to most of the medical care and most of the counselors or anything in regards to the military, they're always like a decade behind where the rest of the world is. So they were still in that era of, no, people don't have ADHD, they just don't know how to act. When you were in school and it's just like, no, it's not, that's not a real thing. It's they just don't know how to behave. Their parents aren't raising them right, this or that. And I feel like was the same thing in the military. It's like, oh no, you're not that. It's just, you're probably on your period this week, or you're probably over emotional because of XYZ, or you ate the wrong thing. And it's just like, can we recognize that mental illness is a thing that needs to be looked at, especially in the military?
Oh yeah, for sure.
The lack of validation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had
yeah.
My last year in was the worst year of my life. I will say that. I was getting med sept, and I had anxiety, and a lot of my anxiety actually came from being med sept, because they put me on limited duty. And when you go on limited duty, it's like everyone thinks you're broken and they treat you like it. They treat you like a broken toy. And it was just a horrible time.
I got called paintbrush because I was painting the dorm rooms when I was when I was medicaled, waiting to be kicked out. So I got called paintbrush.
Yeah, I got called useless.
Ooh, that's even.
Yeah.
At least they had a clever nickname for me.
Oh yeah. See, I would have rathered that at that point, because the first time I heard someone call me useless, it was like everything about myself. I had so much pride before then because of I was good at everything I did. And I was always one of the best, my chiefs and my first classes were all looking at me like, you're gonna be great someday. You're gonna be a senior chief. You're gonna be this, we can get you there. You're gonna be awesome. And then it was one day like all that's ripped out, and they were like, you're going to limited duty. And I got there and it was like the saddest thing ever, because everyone there is there to leave and nobody's happy. Everyone's just, it's a terrible time. And, they don't take care of that mental health aspect at all. They make it worse, honestly.
Say it like that is, I'm glad, I hear a lot of veterans, they talk about it's where it's like, okay, yeah, the VA is still nowhere near up to snuff. I've been fighting them for damn near 20 years on everything. And I've definitely have won my battles. And I feel pretty good that I have pretty much defeated the VA on numerous occasions. I mean, I don't, getting into it because it was so long ago. And I remember serving under Don't Ask, Don't Tell was, I don't know if I want to get into this because this is like, I'm trying to figure out how to like go around it because it could be a bit triggering, like, the circumstances of how I was kicked out and what happened. Like you said, the last year of my existence in the military was pretty effing miserable. I was left Germany, went to station in Korea, which was about the worst place ever. It's like, even though I loved the culture and I loved going and hanging out in Korea, like what they had me doing there was they're like, hey, you're a cop, but you've never worked flight line. You had to work law enforcement. So I had to go on town patrol and patrol the drunks. And it's like, oh, I just hate this. This is really awful. And it's when I was getting, okay, so I guess it's, I had an incident. Something happened in 2001 that I'm not going to share, but it was something that at the time I had to hide because it's basically, I was told that if I came forward with it, I would have been kicked out as well under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So that's that extra glory as well. So for years that really just, and by 2003, I had reached my end and that was the end of it. And I had Med 7 in Korea, and that was just awful. Then I got sent to Fairfield because I had my choice of being kicked out of the military in Texas or California. So I was like, ooh, that's close to San Francisco, the beacon of gayness. I will go there. And because I didn't have, I'll be very honest, I didn't have anywhere to go being kicked out of the military too. I couldn't go live with home. I didn't have any family. I didn't have anywhere to go. That's kind of my situation when I joined the military. It was, hey, you're gay or whatever, get the F out of our house. So, and when I got kicked out, there was nothing. There was no resources. There was nothing. And if I had to go to the VA, they said, well, we don't give a shit. We don't give a shit about you. There's combat veterans coming back in. We don't have the resources. So basically, why don't you just either come stick yourself on a 72-hour hold or just go let the county of Sacramento deal with it. And it was a pretty bad state. And it's where it's like, if I would have told them at the time that like, hey, I'm gay or I'm trans, or if I would have come out as queer, even in 2003 as a veteran, I would have had all my benefits cut off still probably too. It's where the VA still has a long way to go as far as making up for the past and where they're going in the future. And so I hear these stories and I just want to say, I'm sorry that all of you you've went through these things, and it's still the VA is not up to snuff in certain areas. So
well,
that was, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to build off of what you said. I feel like I had a very similar event happen to me. And because I immediately became a problem, instead of dealing with the people who did it properly and making it so I could continue my career properly, they wanted to kick me out because I was unwilling to go to the same base. I was in California at the time doing language training. I was a linguist, and the next step was to go to Texas for the like actual job training that you had to do. And they were linguists too. And even though they were court-martialed, they didn't get their security clearance taken away. So they got to keep their jobs and just move on with their career. And when I was like, no, I will not be subjected to going to the same base as them, they were like, well, sorry, you're going to get kicked out then because you're refusing to train. And I was like, excuse me, they're in the wrong here. Why am I being punished? And I regularly get asked by clients, they're like, well, how was the military for you? How was it for women? And I was like, honest, I can't be honest with them. I can't be like, honestly, they treat women like second-class citizens and they don't like to believe us or believe the things we've been through well enough to make sure that we're not suffering even more after the fact.
I can attest as security forces, like this was 20 years ago, I can have many incidents that I've had to deal with on a basis of where when we call the investigators in to deal with that certain type of incident, the first thing is basically victimizing the victim once again through methods of questioning and just absolutely horrific. And I guess it's where I got disillusioned with my job because it's like, I'm kind of a pig, but at least I'm an Air Force pig. And I thought there were supposed to be standards. I thought there was supposed to be some sort of accountability. It's like Air Force integrity first, but it's like there's absolutely none of it in some cases.
Especially in the upper echelons, because like the second a warrant officer or an officer of any sort is in that courtroom saying he didn't do anything wrong, they're like, okay, the officer said so it's all fine now. And things are just swept under the rug and not treated accordingly. As far as I know, all three of them, or at least two of the three, are still in their service and still serving. And I would have been at 13 years now. They're already at their early retirement age or time, so like they got to continue their careers and I could not, and it is kind of a slap in the face, honestly.
I do feel like there's one thing that everyone here can see, at least from other women they may have served with, is that even for any of us, it always, like, personally for me though, it felt like every woman that I was working with in my unit and training, everything, we all had this almost like shield up to be like, oh, hey, no, we're stronger than that, or we would always have to like fight to prove ourselves. Even if we did something perfectly, it was, you didn't do it well enough. Or say if you're qualifying or something and you shoot 39 out of 40, you didn't hit 40. Why didn't you hit 40? But yet any other person, any other male getting the bare minimum is like, yeah, you got this. And it's just like, why are we held to yet so much of a higher standard, but yet considered so much lower than everything else? And having every single one of our problems blown off as either we were asking for it, it's because of how we were dressed in civilian clothing, it's because periods, it's because whatever it may be, it's never boiled down to, or it's never like the issue for, I guess, normal people. And it was always our fault.
I was told that if I hadn't been at a gay bar, that none of that would have happened to me. That's exactly what I was told. And it's like, whoa, well, thanks for that. And it's like, I can, at the time I was not out, I was not trans, and a lot of I will say this, it's, as not being out, not being trans, I was very much, presenting male at the time. And that was another reason why I was definitely not listened to. And I will take that as well. It's just, the military and those types of incidents. Yeah. They don't just, no.
And that comes down to, as well as like how people even view what they consider feminized. A lot of times gay men are even viewed as feminized and get looked down on for that. Like femininity tends to be what's looked down on. So then when you're something happens like that, that their first thought is it's got to be your fault. And it's like, why? obviously not the aggressor in that situation, but yeah, and so much of the military, I felt you either had to try to prove yourself more than everyone else, um, especially the guys, and you were held to a higher standard. And then there's, if you wanted to be accepted, you either had to like do that or act like the dudes, which is where I fell under. Acting like the guys kind of gave me an in and gave me a little bit better treatment from the guys, and that's something I'm always gonna like regret doing because it was not good behavior. It was terrible, because I bought into toxic masculinity, and it's hard to like like think about that and realize where I stood within that framework. Um, but yeah, so if anybody wants to continue.
No, the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is just like how I feel like there's a lot of correlation, not so much to, but just like being a woman in general and how you get treated, not only in the military, just by day-to-day stuff, but how it also correlates back into the current world too. Just different things, how groups of men or the guys who are just being bros, things they say about women or how they treat women, or even in the gaming industry, how women, I've noticed at least similarities from being in the gaming industry afterwards, that women are not treated the same as men or not considered to be on equal footing as men, regardless of how much knowledge they have. And you get made fun of regardless. In the military, if you're a woman, you get called a clearing barrel. If you are in the gaming industry, you just basically get told that you're just going to be carried the entire time. It's they're not the same insults, obviously, but I mean, like it feels like everyone always finds their way to insult women
and undermine their skills and intelligence.
Yes.
Yeah.
The idea that women in the LGBTQIA community has not been involved in fandom since the very beginning, which is just the absolute big lie. It's like the thing is like, women in marginalized groups have always been in there in the fandom. It's like now that it's the problem now is that with these like dudes who are just refusing to give up control, it's that, well, they're like, well, now I just can't do what I want. I'm like, yeah, exactly. You have accountability now. You can't get away with your shitty ass behavior because people are calling you on it now. And it's like, well, these people, like all of you groups weren't here when I was no, we were always here. We were always in your fandom. We always were. And now we actually have the basically the agency to speak up on this garbage and just go, yeah, basically F you.
Yeah, we have a voice now, so we can be louder about it. We can actually, I'm right here, I'm playing my games, I'm streaming, or I'm running a social media account, I'm doing all this stuff, we're all able to be out here and show our faces and be like, look, I love these things. I love these things that other people love. I love being a nerd. I love playing Pokemon. I love playing Skyrim. I love games, and, people acting like that's new. It's like, no, I always liked those, but growing up, people kind of look down on me like that's a boy thing, or that's that's just not the kind of thing I should be interested in, and it's like, no, I'm gonna like it anyways.
I get told that because I have a lot of fandoms and there's things I've loved. I've loved professional wrestling my whole life. It's just my thing. I just love it. It's something I've always been into. I go to independent shows all the time and it's my thing. And I have a joke. I also do stand-up comedy, so I'm just going to promote myself there. It's like, besides being like a very mediocre gamer and streamer, I also do comedy. And I tell people like, there was the longest time, like, I was much more ashamed to be a wrestling fan than I was a queer ever, because it's like, it's a lot more shame than that. But now it's like there's like a lot of LGBTQ representation in wrestling, and the shitty fans, pardon my language, like not good fans in wrestling, they can't take it because they're like, where is all the gayness coming from? It's like wrestling has always been gay, even if it's like two macho, sweaty dudes grappling each other. I'm like, think about the homoeroticism of that, or just very, like the term is a sissy wrestler, just things like that. It's like, queerness and gayness has always been very inherent in wrestling. And that kind of goes for a lot of fandoms too. It's always been there. It's like Star Trek. It's one of those things that, if you're some edgelord, meme lord piece of garbage, it's like, well, Star Trek, that's not a fandom for you. I mean, that's luxury space gay communism. It's like, that's the big dream right there. It's like, so if you're some sort of piece of garbage, it's like you need to maybe get out of Star Trek fandom and follow William Shatner on Twitter or something and scream at clouds, go touch some grass or something.
Screaming at clouds.
The only positive I can say about being treated or being told like things are just for boys, or that women don't play games or girls don't play games or whatever it is, that because of those people and that type of thinking, all my Pokemon cards from like Gen 1 are still in pristine condition because I never got to play with anyone.
Ooh.
I used to have, like, when I had very male coded toys, and I had like all the GI Joes and stuff, and I never let all the other boys come play with my stuff. It's like, you're gonna break things. Don't break my things. Like, why do you have to break everything? Men, stop destroying things.
Yeah, no, for me it was mostly just I would bring like a deck of cards or something, and this was like when Pokemon first came out, when Yu-Gi-Oh came out, and I wanted to be with the people who were just sitting outside during recess or whatever and playing Pokemon battles against each other, or they were doing Yu-Gi-Oh battles against each other, or whatever it may have been. I wanted to join in on that, but I always got told no because they didn't want to play against a girl, or, oh, how much do you really know? And that always bothered me. Do not question my knowledge on a game that I'm passionate about. Or better yet, just stop questioning women's passion in gaming in general.
No, I love it.
It's not that they didn't want to play you. They didn't want they didn't want to lose to you. Was the thing.
Oh,
That's the big one. They don't want to lose to you.
That's what I was about to say. Like, I remember whenever I first like got into like gaming and streaming, there'd be people that'd be like, oh, let me carry you. And then I would do well at like a certain thing, and they'd be like, oh, no, I don't really want to play with you. Or like we would play together and I'd kick ass, excuse my French. But like I do really well, and they'd be like, oh, well, you just like stole all my kills. And I'm like, bro, those would be assists, not kills. Like, get out of here. Like, step up. You know what I mean?
It's like that same person. It's like, it's like, if you were like in combat, would you say that? Like, it's almost like, is this like a Legolas, like Gimli type of competition to you where you just have to like, you're counting? I never understood that. Like with a competitive, like when it's a PvP or you're playing as a team and everyone has to be competitive inside the team. It's like, how about not?
Yeah, how about we just be happy we beat the other team? Like, yeah.
But they find ways to just like attack, even if it's like PvP 1v1, and it's a guy versus they find out that you're a girl, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you did this wrong, and you cheated, that's how you won. But if it's a guy versus a guy and the other guy wins, it's all of a sudden, oh man, bro, that was so good. How'd you do that? Can you teach me that? And it's like, wait a minute, hold on. Why am I automatically blamed for cheating? What? Or if it's there's so many different, or even if you're joining, I hated joining voice. I used to play WoW a lot, and I would randomly join raid groups and dungeons and things like that. And so they'd be like, hey, we're in voice here. I regretted ever talking in voice whenever I did, because at that point, either you were forcibly carried to where people wouldn't let you actually do what you need to do, or they just wouldn't believe you. It would be, oh no, it's okay. We've got this covered. We don't need this. Or straight up, you'll just get kicked.
That happened to me on Overwatch a lot. Like I would be teamed up with my brother, and yes, my brother did carry me a bit because he's much better at that game. But like I held my own and I did well. But every time we'd get in there, they'd be like, oh, is that your girlfriend? Is that why you're carrying her? And it's like, ooh, gross. No, bro, that's my bro. Like, we're besties and he's helping me learn the game. And they're like, oh, that's so lame. Like, and it's like, can't I just learn the game? Like, granted, I'm new to it and I'm not great, but like, I'm doing okay. Like, you're not having to bail me out every 5 seconds. Like, hold up.
Yeah, that can feel a little discouraging, honestly.
I don't play Overwatch anymore.
I don't play WoW anymore.
For a very real reason. Like I PvP, no.
A lot of games where I have to talk to other people. I've given up like a lot of like voice chat in games because it's like anytime it's like they see my name's Diana, they're like, why do you sound like that? I'm like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And I'm just like, it's like, because I can't do anything about that. It's just like, well, I'm gonna have to mute you. Because as much I'm gonna say I'm trans, and everybody like, oh, cool. And it's like, are you really cool with it? Or are you just gonna keep calling me bro and dude and all these things? Even I said, hey, please stop it. It's like, please don't do these things. And it's, a lot of games like PvP games, I've just had to stop because it's, hey, I don't even talk to my mom, so you don't need to insult her, because it's not going to get back to her. It's not like I'm going to go, mom, do you hear what this person say about you? It's awful. I guess because I like playing a lot of goofy games and things like that. It's like in PvP games, I do like, and I still keep some of them around, but it's at the same time playing with other people and talking to them. It's like, no, I don't think so.
I think I got lucky because my mom, she's kind of a gamer as well. And so she has that open sense of humor of just how women generally get treated. And she kind of always taught me how to like fight back with sass and kind of shut up your opponent or whatever. So there'd be times where people would come and be like, oh yeah, no, I slept with your mom. And like, I'd sit there and I'd call for her and she'd just be like, well, I guess you weren't very good because I don't remember you at all. Or she's like, hey, you remembered me at least, so I'm doing something right. Or like she would just find a way to make a joke on it. But that's how it's bad that we would have to go that route to either one, get the person to shut up, or two, get them to be like, oh, hey, no, you're actually cool. It's like, no, we're not cool. It's like you're being gross. Or if you're even good at a game. So I'm gonna go back to WoW for an example. I was part of a guild. And there were some mechanics, and I was just explaining the mechanics during a fight. And at the time, I was dating a male, and he was in the guild with me. And another member was like, hey, how does your boyfriend feel about you flirting with all of the guild mates? And I was just like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you're just sitting here doing this. It's like, dude, I'm talking about what not to step in to avoid damage. Where are you getting flirting, and who is flirting with you? Because I think you need to talk to someone. Because
Ew. Why is basic communication always taken as flirting?
Yes.
It's like my least favorite thing, because that's the other thing is they're like, oh, hey girl, like you single, you want to like, I'm like, dude, we're playing a game. Like, we are not at a bar. Am I like, hey guys, anybody want to? No, I'm just trying to play a dang game.
I'm just trying to win here. Like,
yeah, I just want to win. But it's not flirting. I'm trying to help out.
It's like, I just want to win the game. It's like being with you. That's obvious loss.
Oh no, I'm gonna use that one day.
I mean, I think that's part of the reason why I come to think of it, there's a lot of games that I don't play open lobby anymore, or I don't join random lobbies. I mean, you can go on TikTok, you can go on YouTube, Twitter, anywhere, and just look up any kind of compilation of women joining an open lobby and how they get treated. There's so many videos, and it's the fact that there's so many times where people try to go, yes, this is improving in gaming, but it's like, is it really though?
It's a lot of people I find who say
steps.
that.
Yeah.
A lot of people who say that, it's like, well, are you actually part of the marginalized group or the group of people that was actually being targeted? It's like, and oftentimes they're not. It's like, and they'll give you all these news articles like, look at what they did over at Activision. I'm like, yeah, but they still suck. It's like, it doesn't really matter. Like, these little tiny baby steps that a lot of these gaming companies and gaming communities make, because it's just, they don't do enough to protect their communities. I mean, a few years ago when I finally got back into gaming, I had lapsed for the longest time. I was playing a lot of GTA Online. That was like one of my first go-tos. I just liked the idea of the open world. And very early on, I figured out, okay, well, I just have to go to private lobbies because it's like it wasn't people like griefing me. It was where I saw the name Divine Diana, and it was an excuse to like, hey, do you want to play together? And it's like, no. It's like, no, don't be so creepy. Just like, what is wrong with you? Be a normal human.
Even that, it's the thing of, in order for there to be any kind of change, we're always seen as angry. We're always seen as like raging on people or things like that. And it's like, it's the fact that we have to scream to be heard. We should not have to scream to be heard. We should be able to have regular conversations and bring up something simple. But no, we have to gather together. We have to get a huge group and we have to get it noticed, make it go viral just to be heard or to be taken seriously. And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of men who are like, oh, yeah, no, I support women. And it's like, really? Let's look into your history a little bit. You're supporting for either the clout, or you're supporting for you don't want to get canceled in the future or whatnot, or you're hoping to hide something that may be in your past. And it's just like, you can see the big difference. It's like during Pride Month when all those companies change their picture to a rainbow and they're like, yeah, no, we support LGBTQ.
Rainbow capitalism.
That's exactly what I was just about to bring up, because all these companies are like, in celebration of Women's History Month. And then my favorite Twitter account in the world.
Yes, I know which one you're talking about.
Gender Pay Gap Bot. Every time there's a company that posts, hey, happy Women's History Month, Gender Pay Gap Bot quote tweets and is like, this company, women make 46% less than men. And it's all over Twitter. And it's like, yeah, these are just little things for show. They're not actually trying to make us more equal. They're trying to make it appear like they are so they can still get our marketing money. Because at the end of the day, women are the bulk of who's buying. Because women of households, like what man is grocery shopping unless they're with their wife? Like, it's a low percentage. I'm sure
it's a very low percentage.
It's a low percentage. It's a low percentage. Like,
my brother does the grocery shopping.
Yeah, like unless they're living alone or like they just happen to be the one that makes the most money in the household and like they like doing it. So the people being marketed to are supposed to be women. And so all these like little, oh, happy Women's History Month. The people who aren't looking deep into what they're doing they're buying it. They're like, oh, look at all these wonderful changes, but they're not seeing the history of, bad things happening in the company. I don't want to like cause any triggering things, but we know what bad things I'm talking about, against women in companies, and whether it's their pay just not being enough or the fact that they're regularly passed up for promotions, it's all a facade. They're all fronting and saying, oh yeah, we really support women or LGBTQ or all that. But it's a game to them. They're like, okay, what can we do to make marketing profitable this month?
I think a lot of those companies, it's like one thing I do a lot of other streaming. I try to stream things outside of gaming. I stream myself watching wrestling, and I stream myself watching old commercials. It's one of my favorite things to stream old commercials and just riff on them. And boy, oh boy, when I do sets from the 70s and 80s, I have to warn anybody who's watching. It's like, hey, this could get bad. And what I mean is, it's like, it's going to be misogynistic as hell. But I will comment of like, holy shit, these are how these companies who are now International Women's Month, let's do it all. Let's be equal. It's like, this is how they used to advertise to women, very specifically, very targeted, very just really gross and misogynistic. It's like, and you could tell it was definitely made by a man. And that's the great thing about the area that we live in today. It's just like, I love pop culture and I just suck everything in pop culture. And this generation, a lot of the younger, as I say, younger generations, because I'm 40 years old almost, that the proof, it's like, like a lot of the older generations, my generation, we can't deny that we didn't, because if we can go back on YouTube and find all the old commercials, everything has been recorded. And that pretty much started in the 80s. And that's where a lot of the same mistakes are pretty much not being repeated, because the younger kids, the teens, they say, well, hey, we saw exactly what you did to screw up the world because you recorded it every single moment. It was just the 80s, and the proof is right there. It's where in the 80s, you really couldn't go, well, it was a lot of people from the 50s were like, well, it's always been this way. And there wasn't a lot of proof. Nothing was recorded at the time. I kind of went off on a rant there. I'm sorry. It was just little.
No, but
you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all.
No, and you can even look at print ads from the 50s and see how poorly targeted they were. They were disgusting.
The 70s was about one of the worst periods for print ads and just sexism and misogyny. Truly. Like, it was that era of like, we could just do what we want now. It's like, well, it's great to break some taboos, but then there's breaking taboos while regressing 20 steps backwards.
But that's what they were doing in the 50s too. They were like, they were just blatantly sexist. There was no like, oh, we're trying to treat you like equals. There was none of that. It was just like, you're the housewife and this is what you can do to please your man. And that's what, like, I'm really deep into the pinup culture, 1940s, 1950s. So like, I have dove deep into a lot of like their old advertising and like beauty products and stuff like that. And it was always something to the effect of, you're not going to be good enough to find a husband unless you use these products. And that was pretty much the message for anything targeted at women, was like, you need this for a husband. You have to have this. So not only was it very hetero based, but it was also very, very sexist. Horribly so.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go back to the wage gap bot that you mentioned, and just how even now a lot of women's pay is based on them having a husband to bring in the majority of pay, to be the breadwinner or whatever. And it's just like, my pay should not be consistent on whether I have a spouse or not. It should be based on like how good I am at what I do. But I feel like a lot of, and just with how we can see how inflation is, we can see how pay has been for people and changing. It's just, it hasn't gotten better, but yet they're still expecting people to be married by the time they're 21 or whatever, and then have this family or this other spouse person to bring in funds while you bring in just a little bit for fun or whatever. And I'm just like, that's not the case. Like, I rely on me, myself, and I for my income. And so it needs to be treated that way.
Yeah, there are definitely shifts happening. There are some shifts. I've been keeping up with some of the stuff, like especially regarding celebrities who make like millions, that are women, that are actually having to deal with like paying alimony and things like that, you know. But it's also like a select few that this is happening to. You know, mainly elite women who are like they didn't get a proper prenup, because you know they didn't the way women view marriage and you know men view marriage as far as like the property goes. You know, a lot of times women aren't thinking too much about that, and now it's like women are starting to have to do that because you know, we're not conditioned that way, not conditioned to think about
protecting our assets.
Yeah,
because they haven't been ours for so long.
Yeah, and some women are starting to get there, and you know, you got Kelly Clarkson paying like I don't know what a large amount, like in the thousands, to her ex-husband. You know, and we're probably going to see more of that, but because of how conditioning works and how you know, like especially gendered conditioning works, you know, there's going to be a lot of women getting screwed over by that. So, you know, I don't know.
Well, like it was said earlier, like every time there's steps to improve something, we're going backwards on other things. Just like, I mean, you can look at it now with how, by the way, if anybody wants to adopt me out of Texas, let me know. You can see how it is in Texas now. There's stuff that things have moved forward on, and then we turn around and it's just like, oh, great. Now I need to have a man's approval, my pastor's approval, and probably my governor's approval to do anything with my body. And it's one of those things where it's just like, how do we keep, it's like, they're like, here, women have these rights, but we want to take these ones away because of it. It's a fair trade. And it's just like, this isn't a trade. Like, we just need to be equal and be able to have this like bodily autonomy over ourselves and over our decisions and what we do. And it's like, it's almost like we don't have that.
Well, and like one of the prime examples of this is the difference between a vasectomy and having your tubes tied.
That's what I was referring to.
Yes. Like any man can go, I think once he's like 25, I think is like the minimum age, they can go and get a vasectomy. I have never wanted children. Never. I have had many failed pregnancies because of my first husband. But I still can't go get my tubes tied. I can't. And like, I have talked to several doctors. They're like, well, what about your husband? I was like, my husband married me because I don't want kids. Like, why does he have to sign off on this? This is my body. Like, I don't want to have something growing in me for 9 months. That shouldn't have anything to do with who I'm married to.
And see, even though it's not like it was, I think it was overturned a while ago. There's a lot of doctors who still won't perform the procedure if you don't have another man's approval. Like, even if it's a same-sex couple, they're like, hey, we want to do this. They're gonna be like, you may break up and marry a man someday, so we're not going to do this. Like, there's some doctors who will, but I think it's because isn't there something where somebody, I think it was somebody who got their tubes tied or something without a husband's consent, and they sued, and so now that's still why doctors will not.
Like one person.
Yeah.
Well,
No, it's just I guess my experience is very much different there, but it's like a lot of doctors, who it's always one of those things that when trans women want to get, the bottom surgery, that a lot of the doctors who do this they're just men. And it's like I was a few years ago was with a friend when she was getting her bottom surgery, and just the questions that this doctor asked was like, when he found out that he was like, because he very much asked her, is like, is your husband, all of these questions, like, what about your boyfriend or your husband? And she was like, I'm asexual, and I don't, and he was very much like, well, I don't see why I'm doing this surgery then. And it was just it's like, I don't know, not having one's own body autonomy and autonomy over their own body. It's just, I can't believe that in 2022 that we're still there, that's where we're still at, that, where people are not allowed to be just, it's like, hey, very much the mind your business situation about what people do with their own bodies. Worry about your own, just
exactly.
I mean,
it doesn't matter if you're married or if you're with that person, you have no ownership over anyone else's body.
I mean, even today, women in corporate environments and even in non-corporate environments, whatever you may be, we can't openly talk about periods. We have to make some joking word for it for men to laugh at it. Like, I refer to mine as Shark Week. And it's one of those things where if we go into the office, we have to pretend to put a smile on, because if we show that we're in pain and they're like, oh, what's wrong? And it's like, oh, I'm just cramping this week. All of a sudden it's harassment. And now we have an issue with HR because we were talking about a regular bodily function that happens to all women, or the fact that we have to sit there in pain when most people could work from home. Like, we have to sit there in pain and not feeling good and in constrictive clothing, whatever it is we have to do for the office or whatever uniform you have to wear. And it's one of those things where it's like, can we recognize that even though we are strong enough to just sit there and go through another week of cramps and headaches and pain or whatnot, that sometimes we just want to sit at home in the dark and get rid of it.
Yeah. I read an article about how it's like they figured out that it's the pain level is on the level of heart attacks. And I was like, what? But that really explains the whole, how women miss that they're even having a heart attack. Because a lot of times.
Did you see the period simulator I did on my boyfriend and a few of my male friends? Like, it was
no, I didn't see that.
Screaming. But yet I'm sitting there and I'm just like, oh yeah, no, that's like a low. And then we get to the high point, like, yeah, no, that's a bad one. And they're just like agonizing in pain, rolling over.
I think I've read an article somewhere about what you were saying about like the pain being comparable to a heart attack. And it was where, a lot of women is like, they were been misdiagnosed and then later actually were, because a lot of just men doctors are like, oh, you're just on your Shark Week or whatever, because, just, it's really, I don't know. It's just the idea of like men just can't handle that. Like, they just don't want to even try. Like, a lot of them just, oh wow, I remember like when I was years ago when I was still not out yet and I was dating my girlfriend at the time, that I used to just to go buy her products all the time. I don't have a problem with that. It's like, why the fuck would any man, like if a man is like, oh, I don't do that, it's like, you don't do that for your girlfriend or what your it's like, you won't do that for your partner. Wow, you suck. It's like, you suck if like you can't go do that. It's like, well, it's like, what do you think? Do you think the clerk's going to ask if it was for you? Because if they do, just say yes and leave it alone. It doesn't matter. It's just like, but I just remember one time specifically, I went up to the counter and like the dude bro behind the counter was like, wow, you deserve a gold medal. And I was like, for what? Just what did I, for what? He's like, well, I don't never do that for my woman. I'm like, you're probably going to not have one very soon. It's just like, you'll probably do it for your next girlfriend too. And then she'll be gone too.
Well, and here's the real problem is because we're not talking about basic things like that, there are still grown ass men that don't know that we can't control when we get them. It happens all the time. No, there was a Twitter post recently, and it was this CEO of this company that was like, we're no longer allowing women to go home during Shark Week because they can control when it starts and stops, and they should not have them when they are at work. A CEO of a company somehow made it to the top of the business world without knowing basic biology, and it's because these things are not being talked about. We're not talking about the very real things that we go through because we're all told, oh, you shouldn't talk about that. It's gross. And I'm like, okay, but boys talk about poop and pee all the time. Why can't I talk about something else that comes out of me naturally without my control? But there are still grown men who don't even realize that like this isn't something we control.
Wasn't there like an astronaut who literally went into space for like a day or something like that, and she got like 100 or something tampons, and they're like, is this going to be enough?
Yep, because they had no idea.
Yeah.
And it's because it's not talked about. We don't talk about the very real things that happen. And then there's other things like endometriosis that only happens if you're like not on birth control. And like some people are only on birth control to prevent endometriosis from continuing to grow. And there are like my mother was on birth control because she has endometriosis in her 40s. And the doctor was like, you're not trying to not have kids anymore. And she's like, that's not why I do this. I do it to prevent the endometriosis. He's like, that's not a real thing.
They just need to combine.
A doctor said that wasn't a real thing. Like, because he was a man and didn't understand that there are other things that can happen.
I mean, that's one of the reasons I refuse male doctors. And people are like, well, no, they're fine. I was like, but they're not. And it's nothing against their credibility. It's that they can't relate to me. They can relate to me based on a book. They cannot relate to me based on experience. And especially after what happened to me in MEPS, it's one experience that ruins it for you. Because you get somebody who, I don't know for MEPS for me, there's a part where you have to get undressed, and a doctor has to look under the gown and make sure that you have a vagina. And the doctor that I had freaking yodeled. It was like, yoo-hoo, you're a woman. And I'm just like, that was not necessary.
That's
so horrific.
That is awful.
Wow.
It was, and he also would like make fun of your boobs if they were one size or not one size, or
what the
yes.
That's so unprofessional.
Welcome to MEPS.
Nah, dude, that would have been reported in a heartbeat.
I listened. Who would have listened?
I don't know, but man, that's that is so uncool. Oh,
I was 18.
I was 18. Horrified.
That's chilling.
I am horrified. I have luckily never had that kind of experience with the doctor, but
there was a female nurse in there too, and even she just like rolled her eyes.
Oh,
it's like it means if she rolled her eyes and didn't say anything, that means it's happening a lot.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I had one of my primary care doctor at the VA. It's like it was a male doctor that it's like, I had seen both times until like, when I started transitioning, I came one time and it's like, and I realized, holy shit. So before he would explain, he like very clearly would explain to me things very clearly, but I went in for a visit and I came out, I'm like, holy shit. I think I was just mansplained to. It's like this motherfucker, like I even asked the next time I came back, it's like, you really seemed, and I kind of was like, and that's when I realized, oh man, this guy here is, I need to like, and I said, you can't be my doctor anymore because for some reason now I've seen exactly the way you operate and what you do. And if that's the way you treat your patients, like, you treat men differently from women, it's like, you shouldn't be a doctor.
But and what's really sad is like the females that they work with know that they're not competent. I had my counselor today, I brought up my migraines and she was like, have you tried magnesium? And I was like, no. She's like, okay, talk to your PCM. And I told her who it was. She's like, he's great, but he's a man. So explain to him, you're going to have to tell a white lie and say that your friend heard from her OB to like bring it to the fact that it's a woman thing, that magnesium can help. And I was like, she's like, I'm sorry, you're going to have to like fib about it. I know how you feel about those things. And I was like, I'm going to have to lie to get proper medical treatment. because he's a man that just can't comprehend the fact that you can't just treat us the exact same way. Sometimes we have other deficiencies that lead to our problems.
Let a man get a common cold and be able to like act properly.
He mentioned about a CEO making comments, and it's like, well, with men, it's like very much it's like, especially cis white men, they fail upwards. It's one of those things like, why did people watch The Office so long? And the question is like, how does Michael Scott get a job like that? It's like, well, it's a fictional character, but the writers damn well knew that white men fail upwards. That's how they get into positions like that. Just like that CEO, it's like he's just continuously failed upwards. Like he was so bad at his job at so many levels. I said, hey, just put him in charge. This way he can do the least harm or something.
I actually have recently had a good experience at the VA as far as medical very recently, before things would get ignored. But the women's health centers that they're starting to put into VAs are actually like kind of nice. They're doing a little better in that regard because, I went to a gynecologist and, she was female. And then she had two other doctors with her. They were also female. And like they were so nice and like so I had actually like fallen off a scooter that day and messed up my knees. So at the time that they're doing this check, they're also cleaning up my knees because I was scabbed up. And they were like, just, how when women are taking care of each other, they're always like, oh, you poor thing. And then like the mom thing, and I got that treatment and I was just like, I'm like, this is the best appointment I've ever had with gynecology, and a lot of times it can be a little, how do I put it, uncomfortable for me because, the way I feel about my body is sometimes not always matching. Sometimes it is, I'm a two-spirit, so the way I view myself is like, it's an interesting, like random little, like I go back and forth all the time. And to have that like experience, it was like, this is amazing. If I had this more often, like I would not feel so like dreaded about going to gynecology, So with that, I actually want to ask, what do you think, the gaming industry, veteran services, things like that, how do you think they could do better for women?
So I can talk on this a little personally with my work. At least we had or we have some like employee resource groups, one specifically for veterans, one specifically for LGBTQ, one specifically for women, and they all kind of get together to kind of try and bring up and talk about things that are going on or to find ways to support the different communities back. Even if it's just something like this is the shirt for our alliance group, and they will go and celebrate Pride with everyone, and they will announce openly and very clearly, like, hey, we support everyone. We're not going to, it's not one of those things where it's just like, you're going to be turned down because of your sexuality or because of how you identify. And if you don't want to identify, you don't have to. And it's giving that flexibility that makes me really, really proud of my company. And just the way and now that I know everyone inside, just how much they do to try and make sure that they're not stepping on the wrong toes, or that they're not being overbearing, or that if there is something toxic about their attitude or something that they're doing, that they correct it, because everyone there honestly does not want to hurt anyone. And if we could just have people, I guess, just listen to each other again and give women a space to speak up without us having to scream, and bring up our problems, and giving the space for the LGBTQ to come up and talk and explain things that are happening with them, and just like giving that area to speak, but actually having executives behind who will listen is the biggest thing. And I think that's going to be the thing for so many people in the industry and in leadership in general. It's just open your ears. Stop making us scream to talk about the problems, and then when we tell you our problems, address them. Don't just make a town hall where it's like, oh, I've heard your problems, and then forget about it. No, address them, fix them.
Just do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Take care of it.
And to kind of build on that, like things like this are great, like doing panels that are focused on women and our problems, or LGBTQ problems, like those things are so important. And I've been to a couple of different conventions, and something I've noticed that could definitely be fixed, and I don't know if there's a way to enforce any sort of thing like this, but like, can we stop having panels that are strictly cis white boys? Like, they're cute, they're cute, and I'm sure they're good at their games, but like half of them are really boring. And the other half we've heard before. We've heard everything y'all have to say. Y'all speak loud and clear, and everybody's willing to listen to you because you're the standard. You're a heterosexual white person, and that's what at least our country is most prone to listening to. And I think really uplifting people in other communities would be a really good start, and not just doing it during Women's History Month. That's like, yes, I know every month has their thing, but like we shouldn't just be uplifting women in March. We should be uplifting them year round. There should be regular panels discussing women's issues, and June should not be the only month we're talking about Pride. It should be a year-round thing where there's year-round support and like acknowledgments of what people are going through, and there isn't. They're doing that like, oh, we did our thing. It's March, we did our thing. And I think it really needs to go beyond that. We need to stop just highlighting certain groups during certain months and really lifting them up throughout the year. We're forgetting about most of these people 11 months out of the year, and that shouldn't be the standard. Not to mention Twitch really needs to fix its carousel, because I remember last year they had highlighted streamers at the top of the page, and this year they're like, oh, we'll put women like number 4 or 5. I had to like scroll to find the ladies carousel. So I think some fundamental changes in the way we see things and like actually truly uplifting the different groups would help.
I guess is like what I'd like to see is like going on, especially with Pride Month coming up, which is, I get asked a lot. It's like, what do you feel about Pride Month? It's like, well, technically I love it, but I absolutely hate it because there's a lot of companies and places that just come out of the woodwork and just want your dollar. And I don't go to Pride celebrations. I just don't. I've actually I've a few years ago protested Pride here in Sacramento it was a fairly big deal. It was about how it was operated because it was sponsored by Smirnoff and all these companies. And it was a big, this is not what Pride is, especially what was in 2019 when I was there. It's just what was going on in the country at the time. It's like, hey, this is, yes, celebrate, but it shouldn't just be about celebration. And I guess it's where it's like what I want to see is mostly just allies being held accountable. That's what I see a lot of that. I guess it's like one of my things that as trans woman I don't enjoy are well-meaning allies.
See, and with that, there's a difference between being an ally and an advocate. And I don't like that ally word. It's that shield you can, but I'm an ally. And I'm like, are you though? A real ally is somebody who advocates for you. Think about these countries that are allies with each other. Whenever something's going down with one of them, they are stepping up and saying, this is what we need to do to protect them. That's a real ally isn't just, but I'm an ally. They're an advocate for you. They're more than just, but you're a safe space. No, you're not a safe space if you're not actively saying things against people who are obviously not allies. If you're not actually advocating, then are you really an ally? I don't think so.
It's just like, in that ally term, it's like, what, are you just truly, it's like, well, when you're with your other cis, if you're an ally, but like, when you're with your other cis hetero friends, how do you act then? As I've lost a lot of friends. It's like ones that I've had to, lose because it's and I've asked that very question. And they're like, well, I'm an ally. I support you, Diana. It's like, yeah, but when you're with your other cishet friends, I've kind of heard that you don't correct people, you just let them get away with it. And I said that can't continue. It's like one of those things that can't continue. And that's very much it. It's like, don't be an ally, be an advocate. It's like, and that's just, I guess it's like the big thing was a few years ago was there was a whole bunch of allies who wanted to get their letter like added to the LGBTQIA. They're like, that stands for ally. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. That's not like, well, we deserve our letter too. It's like, you don't though. You just don't.
Yeah. And the allies that stream under the LGBTQIA tag, I'm like, some of the people, they're not part of the community, but they're streaming under it saying, well, I'm a safe space. I'm an ally. And I'm like, but you're actually actively not being an ally by streaming under that tag whenever you aren't part of the community. It'd be like a non-veteran streaming under the veteran tag because, but I support veterans. No, it's not the same thing. You're not a veteran. You can support us without trying to be a part of us because you didn't go through what we went through, and same thing with the LGBTQIA. Like, you can say you're an ally, but you're not part of us. You're not going through the same things we're going through. You're not dealing with the ostracization of being in that community wholeheartedly.
I guess like the allies, like, the way allies and the advocates, it's like, what I would say, it's like, hey, allies, it's like, if you want to become an advocate, it's like, and you're a gamer, start there. Seek out your LGBTQIA streamers, like, the smaller ones. I mean, I'm a tiny little streamer. I have less than 100 followers. And, it was hard for me because, like, I'm very technical. I was still learning how to stream properly and get all the technology. But it's like, find your small streamers, find the LGBTQI streamers that are making a difference and stream with them, promote them. It's like, and just say, hey, promote real safe spaces. Like you said, when you see straight and hetero people like under that LGBTQIA banner and they're not being a safe space, it's like, well, you're not doing enough. It's like, so when queer people tell you that you're not being a safe person, don't correct them with, well, I'm an ally in heart. Look at my Pride cup that I got from Target in my Chick-fil-A sauce, just all these things like where you're just, like a lot of people who, I guess it's like, that's one thing I would like to see, especially in the gaming community, is like people who say they're allies of our, of women and then the LGBTIQ community and other marginalized groups, act like it, act as if, reach out, and don't just reach out during a particular month, do it 365 days a year. And push those, and at the same time, use your voice to talk about it, but at the same time, push their voices forward too. Use your platform, and that's, I guess, a lot of well-meaning allies and a lot of cis people. That's what I wish that's where I would like to see that go.
I just kind of want to see some of the infighting too to stop within the tag as well, because I don't know how many times, or like basically where I felt like I wasn't LGBTQ enough because I was either in a hetero-facing relationship at the time, or like I'm in one now, and so people be like, you're straight, and we're just like, no, me dating a guy doesn't mean that I don't have all these other feelings, that I don't have this, that this isn't what I clarify myself as or what I choose to be. And it's like that doesn't take it all away. That doesn't all of a sudden, it's not like a switch that you can flick. Just trust me, if it was a switch that I could flick and just turn things off and make the world easier, please. But that's not how it works.
Preach.
Right now, like heterosexuals misunderstanding bisexuality is one of the wow. And I'm not bisexual. I don't identify that, but there's just a lot of bisexuals who are just have to deal with that very problem with, like, a lot of their people they know, like, well, you're with them, like you're with a man or a woman now. That means no, it doesn't mean that I'm straight. It just doesn't mean that. It's like, you just use your head.
It doesn't mean all those experiences that I had with a different sex partner, it's almost like they're being invalidated just because they're like, oh, yeah, well, you're in a hetero-facing relationship now. It's like, okay, so does that mean my entire past is just gone?
I think, purity test with inside the own community needs to stop too. And it's because it's one of those things that, hey, those purity tests, and, it's very much like, hey, it's like, when people talk about cancel culture, and I hate to use that word because it's that term, because it's just a stupid buzzword, but it's like, well, that's one of those things that was, yeah, wow, it's like it's really got our especially in LGBTQ groups just fighting within each other and turned against each other, and it's like that just needs to stop, because the ones who are coming at us and just coming at us in bad faith and doing all the bad things, they love that we fight and just try to invalidate each other. And it's where it's like, yes, it's another thing that just, hey, everyone, if we stop invalidating each other and stop following their plan, we can actually beat them, because they don't really have any say or pull anymore. They're about this. That's they are actually way more marginalized than everyone else at this point. And
Yeah, as far as the infighting goes, like, it's hard to see. It's really hard to watch, especially like we have a larger world that is against a lot of these identities. There is a point where like some acceptability for certain groups over others has happened for the norm, but when it comes down to it, as I've often said, they're gonna people will chip away at who they view as the most marginalized. They're gonna chip at their rights until they can start chipping away at the other ones. I'm like, once they chip away at one smaller group, they're gonna keep going. And I'm like, we can't allow that to happen. We have to like protect each other, because who else is going to do that?
And it's like these couple of bills that have recently come out, the Idaho bill and the Florida bill, the one for the trans kids and the Don't Say Gay bill. There was something I recently read, and it was like, so many people were willing to attack one part of the LGBTQ community, the T. People were so willing to attack that, thinking that they would be saved from, whatever. And then all of a sudden we've got legislation that's against other parts of the community as well, because people didn't speak up whenever one part of the community was being attacked, because they thought they'd be safe. And that's exactly what the hetero America wants. They want us to be okay to let that part go, so that, well, once that part's gone, all right, well, it'll be a little bit easier to attack this group now. And that's just how it's going to keep going unless people speak up.
it was very much for trans youth and just trans people in general. It's like, it was very much like a few years ago, like, when marriage equality became a thing, it was like, well, trans people were like, yep, they're going to come for us, because a lot of those right wingers, they've pretty much lost their war. And one thing they're going to do is they're going to try to use, like, they're going to come at the, especially the gay and lesbian community, and try to, find ways to do that. And it's very much like, I've met a lot of gays and lesbians who are coming from the other side of like, we don't like trans people. It's like, well, remember who threw the first bricks? It's just like that. And just also, it's like, once they come for us and they're done with us, they're going to come back for you. It's just, my Oma used to tell me that. My Oma was, she was a German national, but she was raised as a young and teenage girl in Nazi Germany, and very much used to tell me stories when I was a kid of how that happened. It was very much like, hey, they were kind of a joke. We kind of laughed at them, and they started coming for small groups, and we were like, oh, everybody was just like, okay, let it happen, because the Nazis are bad people, but they'll stop. And it just didn't stop. They kept coming and coming and coming for everyone. And that's kind of how that works. It's like, once they're done with one group, they will definitely start working their way again. And it's where it's like a lot of the LGBT, just women, any marginalized communities, it's like, hey, if you put all of these marginalized groups together, you actually just, you have a lot more power than the people coming at you, way more, because they're just a bunch of old white dudes who,
want to go back 50 years. Yep.
They're Montgomery Burns.
They want to go back to their good old days without realizing that the reason they got to those good old days was by stepping on marginalized communities. That's the only way they were able to build those big, beautiful, their big economy. It was built off of the labor of people who couldn't speak up.
Yeah. So we've gone for more than an hour.
There's a lot to talk about.
I mean, yeah, because we're in 3 different groups here. You've got LGBTQ, we've got women, we've got veterans. There is so much more to cover. But I guess I want us to close out a little bit by, talking about any advice you have for anybody, any vets looking to get into streaming, gaming, anything that, or just trying to get by while they still figure things out. Because I will tell you, the other worst part of my life is that 2 to 3 years after I got out of the military, and I was trying to figure out what was I going to do. You know, I'm sure some of you have had some kind of experience where the transitioning out was really difficult. So, what's something you would give like your younger self as advice to be, as they're getting out?
So one thing I'd like to say is that, like, I know that a lot of people join the military fresh out of high school, and that mindset when you're leaving high school is, what are you going to do when you grow up? And for a lot of people, the military was that pause that we needed to kind of grow up a little bit and figure who we were. And then you have a whole nother growth period after getting out, because the military treats you a very specific way. And suddenly you either have to treat your own life that way or learn how to treat your life from then on out. And I think the biggest piece of advice is, like, don't rush it. Take your time. Don't feel like the world is collapsing on you and that, like, you have no time to do anything. You'll figure out what it is you need to do. Just find some people that'll help you through it. Take your time and find people that'll help you through it. Those two pieces. Like, find somebody that, like, you can talk through the serious shit with, not just like the day-to-day, but like the deep stuff. And it doesn't have to be your partner either. It can just be a friend. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and basically just, if I was talking back to the younger me, it's just, don't be so quiet. Don't be so silent about the things that hurt. And when the things do start hurting, to not be afraid to ask for help as much as it is. Because most of the times you just want to kind of like sit by yourself and just push through it and keep it down, but that only makes it worse. So it's one of those things where it's just like, don't seclude so quickly, because it's so easy to do. But there's people out there. There's friends that you have and you will make, and they would rather sit there and hear you vent for 2 hours versus hold it in and cry yourself to sleep. So it's don't be scared to talk. Don't be scared to speak up. And for those who want to get into streaming, there's people here for you. There's multiple different groups of either vets that game together or people that work with veterans. And I mean, there's a place for you to come and talk and help ease you into it, to help teach you. And it's the same thing for LGBTQ as well. It's like, you will find your group of people to help keep you safe. It's bad that we have to, and it's going to be hard. Don't get me wrong. It's going to be hard, but there are people here for you who will cheer you on.
And just, yeah, saying that exactly what you were saying is like, there's your family and then there's your chosen family, which, for LGBTQI folks, that is very important. And if I could go back and tell my younger self some things, it'd probably be like, hey, this streaming thing in 2003, that's not a thing, but you might want to record yourself playing video games so you can get in on the ground floor of this and be a real big success. Now it would mostly be, it's like, I guess I would tell my 2003 self, it's like, hey, don't give up things about your identity. It's like, when I was medicaled out and, kicked out in 2003, I gave up a lot of things about myself. I had a choice. It's like, come out as trans in San Francisco and lead a probably not great existence, or just put myself back in the closet and normalize. And I did all the normalizing things. And at the time, I would not go back and tell myself, hey, just come out and do this. But it would just be more vocal about who you are. Don't give up things about your identity, because I gave up gaming too. It was just one of those things. Well, I'm not in the military anymore, so I don't have to do this anymore. I have to go out and find a job and do all of these things. And I completely gave gaming up for well over a decade. So it's like, for the past 4 years now that I've gotten back into it, I've caught myself up with all the recent history. It was like, well, what, EA sucks? It's like back in the day, they used to make all the good sports games, but they suck now. So I guess it was just tell my younger self to hang on, and then just like, anyone who's getting out of the military now, especially trans people, it's like I still know some trans people who are in the military, and it's not great. And it would just be, hey, it's like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you something, well, back in my day it was this bad, so you have it a lot better, because it's just a very subjective experience if it's good or bad. And it's just very much the thing, just don't give up hope. I don't like to be one of these, I hate not sounding inspirational, where it gets better. And because I've had to look a lot of trans people in the face, and they're like, well, it gets better, right? I was like, no, it might get worse before it gets better, or that's the reality of things. But the most important thing that I always try to tell other trans people, especially like baby trans people, is like, listen, that it's your job to stick around, please. It's like, a lot of them are suicidal, just stick around. It very much, even if you don't have a reason to live, I tell like a lot of just LGBT, just like, that us being here, our continued existence is an act of resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's my final message, is that, just, hey, if you're having trouble just surviving, if today is like, I don't want to survive, just put it in your head that, hey, me being here means I exist and I take up space every day. Make yourself visible if you have that kind of courage.
Yeah, that actually resonates with me as an indigenous person. We've been through all kinds of hell, excuse me, but like if you're native, you've been through all kinds of genocide. Like one of my tribes at their lowest point only had 200 people left. But they're still here. That tribe is still here. It's got 2,000 members now, and their lowest point was 100 years ago. So, they've managed to multiply, 10 times what they were. Keep going. That's the big thing. Like, you keep going, because that actually does a lot more than people realize. Just existing and, trying to live your life as awesome as possible,
And the ones who are going to try to, stop you and just rain on your parade, if they see you existing and being happy, it's like, well, that's just the ultimate slap in the face to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the biggest piece of advice I would have ever given my younger self is find people that you relate to, that you enjoy stuff with, in a positive manner that can support you. Like, it is very easy to get into groups that are not very positive, that are a little more toxic leaning, and make friends with, just because they give you attention. Look for positive. Look for people who are going to help you grow, and applaud you as you grow. But yeah.
I feel like there was just an uncomfortable silence there, so just like applause. We'll just throw some applause in there.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining in. You guys, gals. I like the word gals. I don't know. It's something I've always used. And I feel like more people should use it, just because guys exist as a word. Why can't gals, But thank you all for joining us. I was actually really happy that, I had people actually respond. This could have been a flop. And you're all pretty great, so. Well. And I've actually met, Picolin here in person, so.
I'm just as awkward in person.
No, she was fun. Air assaults, All right. Hey, Rob, if you're